Story 1. The knock at 3 a.m. Rewind. I was driving home after a 12-hour shift. 3 in the morning. My eyes were sandpaper. The highway was a pale river of taillights. I pulled into the rest stop because I couldn't trust my eyelids to keep me upright. 10 minutes, I told myself. 10 minutes and I'd be right. The air smelled like diesel and wet gravel. My car fan clicked in the dark. I laid the seat back and tried to count the seconds into sleep. The world shrank to the ticking of the dash and my breath fogging the glass. Then 3 knocks. Slow. Patient. On the driver's window. My heart clamped hard in my throat. I froze like a pressed flower. Every muscle went quiet. I expected a voice. Nothing came. I thumbed the key fob and lights cut through fog. A tall figure stood in the beam, hood up, head down. No face. No mouth. He knocked again, same rhythm. When I clicked the dome light, he stepped back into the fog and vanished like smoke. No footsteps. No car. Nothing but the hiss of my engine cooling. I called a friend and lied that it was nothing. I drove off like a man running from something that had no tracks. In daylight I went back. Benches. A vending machine buzzing. The surveillance poles turned their blank faces at the lot. No footage available, the attendant told me like he'd been asked the weather. Weeks later, after a rain, I saw a faint smear on the outside of my window, a ring like a palm. It washed away but the memory didn't. What would you do if someone knocked on your window at 3 a.m.? Would you open it? And that's when I realized, he had knocked 3 times and the clock on the dash only had 2 hands. Story 2, the empty cruiser. Rewind. I drove tow for a couple of years. Night calls taught me to read the quiet. One snowy November, I got a Washington State Patrol call that led me 30 minutes into the mountains off I-90. Fog so thick it felt like soup. The cruiser sat on the side of a dirt road. Doors wide. No lights. No officers. My truck lights threw long ghosts between the trees. The world was silent in a way that makes you listen to your own heartbeat. I grabbed my tools and my service pistol. Habit, training, safety. I walked around the cruiser. The rig still had radios, CAD, flashlights. Everything in place except the patrol rifle from the trunk. The trunk was open and empty where the rifle should be. No footprints in the mud but mine. No blood. No sign of a scuffle. Just the missing rifle and a glove on a branch, dusted with soil. I called dispatch. She confirmed the broken-down cruiser. She didn't confirm any missing person. Later there was no record. No follow-up. No news. Just a hollow where a gun had been and my own stomach clenched tight. On the drive back I felt watched, like I'd touched something that wasn't for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen the first page of someone's disappearance but not the rest. And that's when I noticed the glove was for the left hand, but whoever took the rifle was right-handed. Story 3, the basement watcher. Rewind. I moved in with my sister-in-law and her kids to reset my life. Small house, big shadows. At first the signs were harmless. Pictures falling, a clock stopping at odd times, footsteps in empty hallways. I shrugged it off. People notice things when they're anxious. Then my nephew started waking soaked in sweat, eyes fixed on the stairwell. My 3-year-old whispered about a man who peeks from the basement door. I laughed it off until I saw the basement light puddle at the bottom of the stairs and then cut off like someone had pinched it out. One night I was making coffee. The house smelled like bleach and wet wood. The baby monitor crackled. A quiet sound like a slow breath came from below. I shone my phone light into the stairwell. The beam snagged on a dark shape at the landing. A stillness so precise it didn't belong to a living body. I went down. Empty concrete in racks. A water heater clicking like a sleeping animal. But at the back, where boxes stacked, dust had been wiped in a perfect vertical sweep, as if someone had cleared space to look up the stairs. There were tiny scuffs on the last step, low enough to be a child's. But no child had been there. My sister-in-law said it was just imagination. My nephew drew a dark man with a hollow face who watches. The next night he told me he'd seen the man press his forehead to the window and count. I packed my things the following morning and left with tears in both our eyes, and that's when my nephew asked, "Does he work nights?" Because he only comes out when the house is asleep. Story 4, the hood people in the same area. We were 3 kids who grew up together. Goth kids, bored of small-town dullness, late-night curiosity our hobby. One hot summer night we drove past our old K-12 school for a laugh. The lights were off, windows dark, the parking lot empty. We snacked in a car under a sodium lamp, comfortable and stupid with the safety of youth. Emily and I crept to the cafeteria windows and peered in. Stacks of chairs. Tables shoved to the side. A hum of plugged appliances in the kitchen. At first it was nostalgia. Then a deep crimson caught my eye. A draped cloth covering a shape, billowing like an offering. I said something soft. Emily froze. Mason, who had gone to peek into a different classroom, yelled from the other side of the building and started running toward us. We crouched. A figure in a red cloak stood rigid under the recessed light, arms straight at the sides, head bowed. But up. No face visible. We ran like kids do when something older than the town scares them silly. Mason screamed that he'd seen 3 more, lined up, backs to the window, robes like someone had sewn a ritual out of thrift store curtains. The car peeled out of the lot like the asphalt was burning. Tires squealed. We didn't call the police. We knew what they'd say. We knew what the town would do to 3 goth kids trespassing at the old school. That night we argued about cults and pranksters and creepers in the dark. The next day I tried to tell my parents. They told me I was drama. They told me not to worry the police. I haven't gone back since. And that's when I remembered, the figure in the red cloak had its forehead pressed flat to the glass, as if it was trying to see me from the inside of a mirror. Story 5. The blue-haired girl and the hotel is ruined. This one is messy. It's not a simple knock or a hush in the basement. It's a road with 2 directions and a choice I regret. Years ago I met a girl online. She changed into someone else. She came to the city briefly with a blue bob and a habit of making people crash into each other. I'd sexted, laughed, convinced myself I'd be discreet. I followed a foolish, dizzy idea to her countryside. A stranger named Adonis volunteered to let me crash on his mattress so I could catch a bus the next morning. The shed he lived in had nothing in it, just a thin mattress, a chair, and a cold undersung roof. I was tired. I fell asleep and woke to his hands inside my clothes, violating me in a way I cannot put lightly. I fought. I screamed. I bit and clawed and remembered all the stories of not being believed. The shed door burst open and a voice shouted in instructions I didn't expect. The man's father dragged me out by the scruff of my jacket, called me slurs, hurled me from his property like a thing to be thrown away. I walked 6 hours back toward the center of town, bleeding from my hands, face bruised, stitched up by luck and shame. Helen, the blue-haired girl, ignored me until I begged. Her friends scammed me like I had inventory on my body. Peter, my friend, accused me of betrayal for kissing a girl he'd loved. The small town split me open. I'm telling this because the horror isn't always a figure in a cloak. Sometimes it's a hand that pretends to be help until it becomes a trap. Sometimes the worst violence comes from someone who is supposed to be a fellow human, and that's when I realized the only thing worse than being hurt by a stranger is being blamed for needing help. Story 6. The janitor on night shift. Rewind. I took a janitor job at a corporate building because heat in winter and a roof at night are underrated comforts. The place smells like toner and cheap coffee. My shift was quiet. I liked the monitors in the security room. They let me watch the building breathe while I ate my sandwich. One night I nodded off in the supply closet. On the monitor, I watched my own sleeping form curled on a jacket like a child hiding from the world. Then a figure, darker than the screen, leaned in and touched my shoulder. The sleeping me twitched as if a hand had pulled invisible strings. I snapped awake and the closet was empty. The hour was empty. But the footage was the proof, and that proof corrupted when I tried to save it. The file corrupted at the one moment the figure was nearest. Management told me ancient cameras glitch. After that I started seeing it on the periphery of the feeds. A chair in the lobby shifting though no one sat, a shadow on the stairwell that arrived 5 seconds before a camera panned there. It was like the building rehearsed presence. It would be where the camera wanted it to be. On a tape I finally kept, the figure walked through the frame and paused, head cocked like an animal listening for a name. It looked at the camera and smiled just before the feed stuttered. And that's when my reflection on the monitor blinked, even though I hadn't. Story 7. The abandoned escrow. We grew up daring each other to explore the old Marshall School on the edge of town. Broken windows. Graffiti like scars. People said it closed after an accident. They said names and then looked away. Teenagers made dares of it. One autumn I went back alone. My flashlight beam cut through dust that hung like memory. The lobby floor was littered with papers. A calendar on the wall was frozen on a date years ago. I felt the past like cold water. The classroom smelled like old glue and sun-bleached paper. Desks stacked as if the bell had rung and everyone left. Chalk dust shimmered motes in the beam. On the main chalkboard someone had written a lesson in cursive. A child's lesson about arithmetic and shapes. Underneath, in the corner, someone else had scrawled another line. Not a child's crooked letters. Neat. Rigid. An adult's handwriting that cut the board like a name. I took pictures. My camera had trouble. The flash would capture one frame and then die for a second like it was hesitant to light what it saw. Down in the auditorium I heard something that sounded like a piano in the next room. The building had no power. The notes were wrong like a song that had forgotten its tune. I climbed to the roof to get a view of the town. Wind stitched at my jacket. I heard footsteps in the hall below. Heavy at first, then light, then gone. I walked back down the stairs slowly. At the second floor landing I saw marks on the wall, tiny handprints and dusty paint leading to the door of room 12. The door was open. Inside, the desks were turned toward the wall. The chalkboard there had one sentence written across it. We watch real close. I laughed at myself. Then I noticed on the teacher's desk a mug with a smear of dried coffee and a child's drawing pinned beneath it. The drawing was of a family. The figure standing behind them was a tall dark scribble that did not belong to the family portrait. The scribble's head had been shaded in, hard and careful. As I turned to leave, the auditorium's old projector flicked to life on its own. A single slide showed the school yearbook photo. Faces looked back. A teacher's eyes in the photo had been blacked out with a marker. The marker lines were fresh. They shone dark in the projector's light. And that's when the speakers hissed and the auditorium whispered my name like a child calling roll. Transition into final reflection. UV heard 7 small awful things. Different places. Different faces. The rest stop. The empty cruiser. The basement watcher. The hooded figures. The village that spat me out. The janitor's sleeping body that wasn't alone. They're not monsters from movies. They're echoes of people, of places, of choices we make and don't make. The scariest part is how normal most of them looked at first. A knock, a stranded patrol car, a kid's whisper, a draped cloak, a helpful stranger, a blinking monitor. Normal is where they hide. So ask yourself, what would you do if it happened to you? Would you drive away? Would you call the cops? Would anyone believe you if they thought you were a kid remembering wrong? Would you stay and stare back? I tell these stories because I lived them. I could explain them away with fog, guilt, and tired nerves. I could call them pranks, glitches, and coincidences. But that doesn't make the feeling go away, the way your skin tightens when the house is too quiet, the way your eyes search a dark window like a hungry animal. If one thing ties these nights together, it's this: evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in people we see every day. It sits down beside us at a pump and pays exact change. It parks a patrol car with the trunk open and walks into the trees. It leans into a supply closet and watches us sleep. It wraps a hood over a head and presses its face to the glass. Evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in people we see every day, and right now it might be closer than you think.